All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to our next edition of Repairers Realm. Today we're going to be talking about spray booth cleaning and prep along with defect removal. And today we have the people from Saint-Gobain to help us discuss this topic. And Kevin, I know you had some slides you wanted to share, so we can go ahead and go through those slides. And if at any time anyone has any questions, go ahead and feel free to put those into the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them today.
Okay, awesome. Thanks very much. I appreciate the warm handoff, the warm introduction. We are really glad to be here. My name's Kevin Cregan, National Accounts Manager with Saint-Gobain Abrasives. And as you mentioned, this is the second of two installments on what we view as important concepts and important best practices in order to start clean, stay clean, and finish clean in collision repair. So today I have with me my esteemed colleagues, Jeff Bell and David Galvin, and I'll turn things over to Jeff and David to introduce themselves. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Kevin. My name's Jeff Bell. I've been with Saint-Gobain about 3 years. Prior to that, I spent 21 years with the DeVilbiss Spray Gun Company, and before DeVilbiss, I actually worked in shops and painted cars for about 18 years. So we'll be able to help you through the getting the clean process of a paint job. David?
Hey, I'm Dave Galvin. I'm an automotive application technician with Saint-Gobain. I've been with Saint-Gobain for about 5 years now. But prior to Saint-Gobain, I was a collision repair technician for about 16 years.
Awesome. Good job, guys. Well, if you wouldn't mind pulling those slides up, we can go ahead and get started. We represent Saint-Gobain Abrasives, but Saint-Gobain Abrasives developed a partnership with many leading manufacturers several years ago, and that manufacturers group is called the Refinish Solutions Group, RSG. You'll hear me refer to that several times today and throughout the presentations. So you might ask yourself, what is the Refinish Solutions Group? Well, the Refinish Solutions Group is a group of best-of-class manufacturers that were pulled together by Saint-Gobain for the objective or the single-minded purpose of trying to be a better partner to collision repair shops and provide more services and product lines to better meet the needs of the collision repair market. So the Refinish Solutions Group is composed of our own Saint-Gobain product lines, that is Norton abrasives, carborundum abrasives, Solar Guard window tints, as well as Frekla products, polishes and compounds. Frekla has now been a part of Saint-Gobain for about upwards of 3 years now, and we're really glad to have Frekla on the team. Excellent line of abrasives for polishing and compounding vehicles. The partner brands included in the Refinish Solutions Group include Parker, Lord Fuser, American Tape, DeVilbiss, as well as Hutchins Tools. So you'll read a little bit more about us or hear a little bit more about us today, but additional information on the products that are featured today can be found at www.refinishsolutionsgroup.com. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to our panel. Scott, TJ?
All right, thanks, Kevin. So we're going to play a short video here and then on spray booth cleaning and prep. And after the video, we'll answer any of the questions that you have. And just remember, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll answer them live on the show. And we can go ahead and start that video.
Jeff, can you tell me again the 4 main sources of contamination in any paint job?
Sure. The main places that dirt would come from would either be off the car itself, off the painter, out of the spray booth, or through the air lines, through your air source of your compressors.
What's one good way to keep contamination out of the airlines?
So what we have here is point of use units. DeVilbiss only offers point of use units for spray booths, and this particular unit is called a DAD Pro, and it's a 3-stage unit with a water trap separator, an oil coalescer, and a desiccant bag. Very easy unit to maintain. This would be something you'd want to put in your A shops or your B shops. Maintenance-wise, you're going to change your desiccant out. It's going to depend on the quality of air going in, but probably twice a year, you know, January, July, something like that. If you really got air issues, it could be 3 times. Very easy unit to maintain. The first stage, your water trap, pop off the anodized bowl, replace the unit. The second stage, same way, is your oil coalescer. The third stage has a 10-pound desiccant charge. There's 6 9/16 bolts in the lid. You remove the lid, you pull out the desiccant bag, this goes in the trash, you pop in a new bag, reattach the lid, and that's it for your maintenance. This would be great for A and B shops. If you got a C and D type shop or a guy painting 3-4 cars a week, there is a more economical unit in the QC3. Does the exact same thing as the bigger unit, but it's on a much smaller scale. Has a 1-pound desiccant charge, and obviously you don't want that in an A shop. This unit can also be used for pneumatic guns of panel bonding, plasma cutting, things like that, where you need clean, dry air at a point of use, but you don't need the great big, you know, point of use spray booth type unit.
All right, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is an automatic drain. It's 110, plugs right into an outlet, attaches to the bottom of the compressor. It has 2 adjustments. One adjusts how often the unit opens, and the other is how long it stays open, and it takes the contamination out of the compressor. And the idea is if you can get the contamination out of the compressor before it ever goes downstream, the longevity on the point of use units will last much longer. So pretty important piece to have in a shop to get more time out of your desiccant units.
Yes, yes. Coveralls would help limit paint
Correct.
or
Yep.
contamination off the painter. Why don't we head into the booth and you could help share some tips with keeping that clean and maintained.
Okay, sounds good.
Jeff, another place not to overlook is keeping the booth clean. Do you have a couple of products to help with that?
Correct, and we do. We have a peelable booth wall coat, and we also have a floor coat. The wall coat is a white peelable substance that's made to go right over the walls. You prep the walls by either blowing off any loose contaminant with a blowgun and a rag. If you get anything where there's too much overspray or the heavy overspray, you can run over it with like 320 or 400 on a DA. It's applied with a typical gravity gun with either a 2.2 or 2.5 fluid tip. Usually 2 coats, kind of a medium coat, and then you let that flash off and you come back with a medium wet coat. This product can be applied over itself several times. So if you've prepped the booth, you've coated the booth, and you get an overspray in a couple spots, you can come right back in, spray it back over itself, cover those spots up. After 5 or 6 times of coating the booth, then you do want to peel it off, and you can do that with a blowgun, blowing it off, or you can come in with a pressure washer, clean the booth, start from scratch, reapply it.
Would you use the same equipment for applying the floor coat?
You would not. For the floor coat, we use a standard pump-up sprayer, and the process for applying the floor coat is you'd want to sweep the floor out, collect all the contamination and dust off the floor. After you do that, the first application is going to be a little bit heavier, about 2.5 quarts for a standard size spray booth. Good for 6 to 8 paint jobs. After the 6 or 8 paint jobs, you come in, sweep the floor out, clean up all the contamination, and you can put an etch coat back down, which isn't going to be quite as heavy, maybe a 2-quart application. What you'll find is after about 6 or 7 paint jobs, you'll notice that the floor coat will last less and less every time. So you'll notice after 2 or 3 paint jobs, you'll see a little more dust. You want to come in, you can sweep the floor up, you can power wash it, clean everything off real good, and start with your 2.5 quart application again. The product is meant to be used over a porous type product. You don't want to put it down over ceramic tile or a painted type floor. It could cause a little bit of a slippery situation. So you want to try it in an inconspicuous area. And the other nice thing about the product is even though it makes the floor and tacky where the overspray sticks to it, it won't stick to your shoes, you won't track it in a customer's car, it won't stick to your air hose, so it doesn't create a mess all over the shop.
That's very nice. We already started getting the booth prepped. We got some masking done.
Yep.
Why don't I throw in some PPE and start applying it?
Sounds good.
Jeff, just like you said, it was pretty easy with minimal prep work to get this on the booth walls. Is the floor coating just as easy?
It is. It's a basic sweep your floor and dust pan it up, pump up the sprayer and apply it. And we have an area where we're going to prep here for demonstration purposes. We can do it right now and show you.
That would be fantastic.
Just take your pumper, pump it up. And you just want to apply a medium coat. Not too wet. And it'll etch right in. And keep your overspray and dust down. Just like that. It's that easy.
It looks easy. And how long before I can walk on it?
You just let it flash off 30 seconds to a minute and it's good to go. It won't stick to your shoes, you won't track it in the car, won't stick to your air hoses, holds the dust down from overspray, especially in waterborne shops where they're using air dryers and stuff that are more turbulent air. It helps keep the overspray down to get you a cleaner paint job.
All right. So after watching that video, there's a few simple things that we can do that we talked about in that video. But one of the first things that I think a shop really overlooks is really their air supply, compressors, lines. It's just always there. You kind of take it for granted. What's one of the things for the air compressors? How often should a shop be draining something like that? Because I think it's something that if you overlook it and don't do it, you don't really realize you have a problem until you have a horrible problem. So what are some of the things that we can think about on air compressor, how often we need to drain it?
I know a lot of times humidity and location of the shop will add to more frequent drainage, but you got to really know the condition. I know some shops would just kind of drain at the end of the day. But Jeff, what was your recommendation?
So, excuse me, thank you. That's where the auto drain really becomes important. If you have an auto drain, you're going to keep that contaminant out of the tank. And if you don't have an auto drain, I would recommend to drain that compressor tank daily. If you notice you're getting more moisture downstream as the day goes on, then you can by all means, drain it lunchtime or something like that too. But at least it should be drained daily, allows the tank to dry out. Again, you're trying to keep the contamination from going downstream, and you'll get more longevity out of your point of use filters.
So it looks like we have a question from the audience, and like we said earlier, make sure you put those questions in the chat and we'll answer them right here. It's just asking if the material to spray the walls are white. I think you said in the video it was, but is there also a clear one, or how do you guys handle that?
So the wall coat itself is white, but there's a glass coat as well for coating the glass in the booths. And that goes on like a milky type substance. It almost looks like a glue when you spray it on, but when it does dry up, it will be a clear type product. And that's available in quarts. But as far as the bulk size for the walls, it comes in gallons. That's only available in white.
Okay. So one of the other things that we didn't really touch on, air hoses. I know when I was in the shop, it was very much, I never replaced an air hose. We had the same one. It had about a ½ inch of refinish overspray on it. But how often should we be replacing something like that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a great point, Scott, because that's probably one of the most overlooked things in a spray booth. Guys look at the hose and they think it looks great, and it does. Hoses normally don't break down from the outside in, they break down from the inside out. They get driven over with the cars, they go through all these bake cycles. So our recommendation is at least once a year, minimal once a year, take that hose out of the booth. You can move it to a prep deck, you can put it in the body man side, whatever the case may be. But as a hose starts breaking down from the inside out, and contamination may come through that hose and defects in a paint job or have to repaint a car, it's not worth the price of an air hose. So once a year, I would take the hose out of the booth, move it to another area, in the shop, like I say, body man, whatever, and replace your hose in your booth.
Okay. So we also talked in that video about the air filters. How do we know when to change those different desiccants? Is there any sign that it needs to be replaced maybe sooner because maybe we're in high humidity or something like that?
Yep, there sure is. So most of your premium type point of use units, including DeVilbiss as well, they will have some type of a humidity indicator on them. The DeVilbiss one that we talked about in the video, the DAD Pro, has a humidity indicator that's right in line between the desiccant tank and the regulator. So it's right giving you a true reading of air. In our case, it's green when it's good. When it turns yellow, it's time to change it. So when that changes, it's absorbing enough humidity to change that litmus paper that's in there, telling you it's time to change your filters. Now, depending on the quality of air going in, could mean how often that changes. If you're in a drier climate, you may get by with once a year. If you're in a more hot, humid condition down in the south in the summertime, Georgia, something like that, you may be changing it every 4 or 5 months. If it goes a year and there's no change in humidity indicator paper, I would treat it like an air hose. I would change my system out once a year minimum.
Okay. So we had a related question that came in from the audience that I'm kind of a little bit curious about the question. And so the desiccant, it's not actually necessarily absorb. Does it absorb the moisture, or is it just attract it so it doesn't get into the airline? They're asking for a little clarification around what the desiccant's actually doing in the system.
So the first stage obviously is your water trap separator, and the second stage takes out oil. Desiccant will absorb or attract to the outside of the bead itself anything else that happens to get past that water trap and oil coalescer. If there's any oil vapor, if there's any type of humidity, it will attract to that and send it downstream. And obviously the idea is the cleanest, driest air possible. In most cases in waterborne shops, the paint companies are looking to have your humidity levels under 10%, and they'd prefer them under 5. And of course, that helps with flash times of waterborne products and things like that. So back to your question, it does attract it to the outside. And in that particular case, it's in a bag. So once it becomes a certain point saturated and that indicator paper changes, then it's time to change that. And again, you just throw the bag away and replace it.
Okay, because that explains something I saw happen. We were at the Skills USA national competition where they were spraying paint for the competition, and we hooked up to the facility's air, and water came pouring out of the airlines. It was literally gallons upon gallons of water in that convention hall air system, and it ruined the desiccant and all those kinds of things because it literally it was like hydraulic pressure coming through that airline. So that that was a little bit challenging that year. We got another question in. Would you ever recommend spraying a little of the floor coating just in a little area, I think the question is?
Yeah, I think what they're trying to ask is, instead of coating the whole booth every time, if you're bringing in, a brand new high-end car and you just have to paint the front bumper or something down low, you can just coat, say, the front end of the booth and not have to coat the whole booth if you're not going to be working in the back end of it, And real quick, back to your desiccant question, your comment about it, the Skills USA, solid content of water or oil will kill desiccant in a minute. That's why you don't want to use a desiccant tank by itself. It should always follow a water trap separator and an oil coalescer. So as long as you're getting the solid content out first with the water and the oil, then the desiccant will absorb the humidity. But if there's solid water going into a desiccant, like you ran into at your skills competition, you're exactly right. It'll kill it in a minute. It's done.
Okay. And so their clarification was to spray the floor coating up partway onto the wall. Is that something you'd recommend, or is the white coating on the walls enough?
So the booth wall coat is not a tacky coat. It's going to dry. You can wipe your hands on it. I'm just trying to think for a second. There's really no reason you couldn't be, 5, 6, 8 inches up on a wall. I don't know, if there's any advantage or turbulent air. Again, when you go back to the dry and waterborne, there's a lot of turbulent air in a booth, and that's where a lot of these guys have seen dirtier paint jobs, because now they're creating a lot of turbulence trying to get cleaner paint jobs with waterborne product. So to have it up on the walls a little bit, it's not going to hurt anything. It's better than spraying. Guys used to take a garden hose in the booth, right, and spray the booth down with water. Well, then you see all your spray booths are rusted out around the bottom. And the other downside of that is you're going to kill your cycle times in waterborne shops, because you're adding humidity to the spray booth. So spraying water is not a good thing by any means, although that's what we used to do years ago. So to get a little bit of that booth floor coat up on the wall, I don't think it's going to hurt a thing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It looks like we have no more questions from the audience. So we'll go ahead and go into the refinish defect removal video, and we'll have some more Q&A after that.
Dave, no matter how much cleaning and prepping we do, it's always that chance we get that dirt in that final coat of clear. What are some good tips on getting that removed?
You're right. We followed all those steps. We're still going to get a nib or two. So the best course of action is to try to keep the repair area as small as possible. So instead of using a 6-inch sander, an 8-inch buffer, we have this kit, the spot repair kit, where we have a 3-inch sander and then a 3-inch buffer. 2 steps on each. So we have a 2-step sand process, a 2-step buff process, and then from there, we're done. It's quick and easy. The repair area is small. All we needed were a couple nibs.
I'm anxious to see it.
The first course of action I like to take would be mapping and masking. When I'm out in the field training new technicians, I like them to take a step back, look at the area, identify their defects, map them with a piece of sandpaper. You can mark them, and then you grab your tape, take that time, tape up your headlight, tape up your bumper, your adjacent panels. Everything is clean and ready to go, and then you can get to work.
So what grit are you going to use for sanding?
So we're going to start with 1500 dry. We're going to use an interface pad. Then we're going to move to 2000, leave the interface pad on. Wipe off the dust before we spray it. Give it a little spritz. And now we're going to go to 2000 wet. If you notice, I did a couple passes there just to be thorough, make sure we got rid of that 1500 grit scratch. Once we're done with the 2000, we want to wipe it dry. Inspect your area. Make sure you remove that nib as well as the 1500 grit scratch. Looks really good. I think at this point, we're ready to buff. So again, we're going to keep it small, 3-inch buffer, 2 steps. We have, the first step will be the super fast compound. The second step will be the finish, the polish. A pad for each. We're going to start with the orange cutting pad. This product, you want to shake it up real well before you use it. You don't need much. A little goes a long way. Again, clean off your area. Inspect it, make sure you have your marks removed. And then we could move to polish. Also, shake thoroughly. A little goes a long way. For this step, we're going to switch to the blue finishing pad.
Okay.
We want to clean off our residue, this time with a fresh clean rag. Of course, inspect it, make sure you removed all your sand scratches, your swirl marks are gone, everything looks great. Your nibs are gone, and we're set.
It does look good, and I could definitely see the advantages of keeping the repair area small.
Absolutely, it saves time, it saves on material. There shouldn't be a need to wet sand and buff the entire panel if we followed those steps of clean prep.
All right, I see some questions rolling in already. I want to remind our audience to use the chat function. They could still get some questions in for us to answer. David, first question coming in. Why are the 3-inch buffing pads different colors from the 7-inch pad?
It's just the way in the manufacturing process. I don't know that there's an important reason for the different color, but the finished polish pad is the same color. It's just that initial cutting pad is orange versus white, whereas the 8-inch setup is white and the 3 inches is orange.
Okay. I see another question here asking why we're sanding and buffing and polishing in a spray booth. At our location, we do have a prep deck as well, so actually all the sanding and buffing is going on in the prep deck. Hey, David, do the Fracklite products contain any fillers or silicone?
No, this is a mostly water-based product. There is no fillers or petroleum in there that So the key is once those scratches are gone, they're gone. So the swirl marks, for example, after you're finished with it and it looks great, you wipe it down, it looks like you've gotten rid of all your swirl marks, test it. Go ahead and wash it with some sort of cleaner or something, and those swirl marks will be gone because you've actually eliminated them. You did not fill them with anything. So no, to answer the question, there is no fillers in the polish.
Very nice. Another one of our audience members is wondering if a standard 6-inch DA could be used or only 3 inches.
Yeah, I mean, all those grits of paper we do make in 6-inch. So if you'd like to use a 6-inch, that's totally fine. And then you can buff it out with a 3-inch. But the whole point of that is to show, the whole point here is to show if we followed all those clean step processes and clean booth and everything, we shouldn't have any major defects. We should only have a nib here or there. There's always going to be some small defects, in which case you don't need the 6-inch DA. You don't need the big 8-inch buffer. You can keep that area nice and small. And that's kind of the point. So yeah, you can definitely use a 6-inch, but the smaller the better at the end of the day.
So one thing that, I've always kind of, we've had those soft intermediate pads. Can we just talk a little bit about what that does for us and why we're using them and not just going directly with the sandpaper on the DA?
Sure. Yeah. That first step of sanding is with a 1500 grit sandpaper, and it's a film backed paper. So it's putting it directly on the DA pad. It's a bit of a firm surface, and it'll tend to dig in, and we don't want to shape the clear. We just want to shave off that defect, this case was a nib. So we just want to shave the top off. We don't want to change the shape surface, and that interface pad allows that contour and move with the shape of the surface without distorting it. And but it's firm enough yet to still remove that nib. So that's it. Not only that, it also saves it helps the longevity of the paper. It helps the paper last longer, and controls temperatures and stuff like that. So there's a lot of benefits. It just keeps it also helps you from burning through as well, is another important thing, burning through the clear coat.
To kind of add on to that point, David, one of our audience members is asking, because they missed it, what was the final grit you used before buffing?
In that case, it was 2000 grit. There's a couple different options in that setup. I was trying to show kind of, those were big nibs, so I used 1500 and then 2000 wet paper, also on the interface pad. But you could change it. You could change your dynamic. It's a dynamics, right? So you could change if it's a big defect, a run, or a large nib, or if it's a small nib. You use different grits according to what the defect is. So the larger the nib, the coarser the grit you want to use from start to finish. The smaller the defect, you could go to finer grit. So you could even start, and finish with a fine grit like a 2500 or something. The great thing about that combo, it'll rub out 1500 to 2000 grit quite easily. So you have a lot of room to play with as far as your grits go in that process.
You kind of already started answering our next question, which is, can this be used in runs and larger defects?
It can. Your process will be a little different. You'd want to, change again. You want to be dynamic in how you approach each defect. So the larger the defect, you're going to want to start with a coarser grit. The coarser the grit, the more material, the more clear coat you're going to be removing. So obviously keep that in mind. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, you can use this kit to remove larger defects. You just have to change your process up a little bit.
And how much compound or polish would you recommend be applied? I'm glad
you asked that question, because in the video I said that a little goes a long way, and it seemed like there was a little bit of pressure in that bottle when I went to squirt it out. So more came out than I was expecting. So generally you'd use 2 or 3 dots about a pea size. I mean, you don't need much of that stuff. A little does go a long way. So that video is a little misleading because I accidentally pushed out too much material.
All right, this question just came in as well. Don't you end up with a flat spot where it is buff compared to the rest of the unbuffed panel?
I mean, it goes back to the question about the interface pad. So if using that interface pad helps keep the natural contour of the panel and the texture and the clear, because you don't want it to be too flat and too glossy. You want it to match the factory look, and from the factory there is a texture, an orange peel to most factory paint jobs. So we want to keep the look, and that is the reason for that interface pad. And of course, keeping your area small. The smaller the area, the less flat effect you'll have. If you used a 6-inch DA, you'd be flattening out a really large area, which would make it more obvious and more visible.
All right.
So we had a follow-up question from the previous video as well. So will the tank and the desiccant and separator, the trap separator, will that help resolve fisheye problems or help prevent them?
So normally if you're having fisheyes, that's a source of contamination somewhere else. There's something that's contaminated in the air. If it's coming through the air lines, yes, the desiccant will remove it. But what I've found over my years of painting cars and working with DeVilbiss, most of the time when someone has a fisheye problem, the source of that issue is not coming through the air lines or the air hose. It's something else, either coming out of the shop or off the car or something like that.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. But if you're watching this video on playback, you can still submit questions to us at repairersrealm@i-car.com, and that'll get up on the screen here in just a minute. And we thank everyone for joining us today, and join us next month for our next installment of Repairers Realm.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.